what if we are approaching a civilizational fork in the road where one path leads to algorithmic control and the other leads to a second renaissance? I'm joined by Jesse Tevelow, an entrepreneur and best-selling author who is sounding the alarm on this critical juncture. Together, we unpack his thesis on why AI needs Bitcoin as a physical anchor to keep machine intelligence aligned with human truth. And stick around to hear why Jesse believes Bitcoin is our best defense in a world where AI makes it impossible to know what's real and the one human skill that becomes more valuable when machines can do everything else. This was a mind-blowing conversation, and I hope you find it valuable too. Now let's dive in. Jesse Tevelow, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thanks for having me, Ram. I really appreciate it. Great to be spending some time with you today.
All right. So you say AI is a mirror. Now, I've used the description Bitcoin is a mirror a lot. I think in a similar way, because you talk about it, you know, that it reflects our values, and it's kind of like how do we apply this, right? Like, how do we instruct it? What do we use it for? And so if our current money system is built on debt, fake value, right? People say nominal growth. When the numbers go up, it's actual growth, right? But it's not. And it's all focused on short-term gains instead of long-term building. It is inevitable, right, that like a centralized force controls that. How do you feel about that with AI, basically? Should it also be as free as Bitcoin and decentralized, or is there a real chance that it becomes centralized and like a tool for manipulation, surveillance, etc.? That's a positive question to start.
Well, you also went right to the meat. You went right to the middle. So, you know, this is, I think, maybe arguably the sort of the biggest question of our time is sort of like, you know, how do we continue to move forward, seeing how centralization has really become a big problem in my mind. I mean, I think we basically had this massive experiment that we just did over the last, call it quarter century, called globalization, right? We made the US dollar the global reserve currency. We exported everything. We stopped making things at home. We did everything based off of, you know, the cheapest production cost, wherever we could get that, whether it was China or Taiwan or wherever. And you can just see that, you know, the government, the centralized systems that we have here in the United States, they are working off of a debt-based system called the US dollar. It's fiat money, which I go into a lot of detail about this in some of my other articles, some of the other writings that I've done. But, you know, if you really study money like I have for the past several years now, you know, I went to school for economics and sociology at Michigan, but they don't actually teach you this stuff at school. And I think over the last 5 years, really from let's say COVID to now, here we are at the beginning of 2026, I think the world's waking up. You know, I think the average person is finally starting to understand kind of how money works, what money is. And I think Bitcoin is honestly the reason for that, combined with the deterioration of the US dollar and regular paper money. I like to call it toilet paper because that's really all it is. It doesn't really have any value. The only reason the U.S. dollar has value is because we say it does. And it's hard for people to understand that, and it almost sounds ridiculous. But I tend to believe that centralized systems are just, it's a pyramid. The power is going to constantly flow to the top. If you're familiar with money, you know the Cantillon effect. I'll just define that for your listeners and the people that are listening. It basically means the people that are closest to the creation of the money are going to get the money first. It's not rocket science. If you know that you have a printer and you can print money and you're sitting there and you're the Fed, the people that are friends and close by to the Fed, whether that's the U.S. government, big institutions, banks, they get the money first. And then once it flows down, the more and more money that's printed, the prices have to go up. That's basic economics, supply and demand. You dilute the currency, everything, the prices are going to rise. And that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in. It's led to a K-shaped economy, right? We have the haves, we have the have-nots. It's getting worse and worse. The middle class is getting hollowed out. Back to your sort of main question, you know, you said you think that Bitcoin is a mirror. I agree with that. Bitcoin, we can talk about that for days, Bram. The spiritual side of Bitcoin, how it changes your mindset, how it really is just a reflection of us and what we do. AI is the same thing. And people from where I sit, from what I see, and I talk to lots of entrepreneurs. I've been working with startups for over 20 years. I see a lot of the most cutting edge stuff, and then I can also see what the general public is doing. And I think a lot of folks are scared, of AI right now for good reason, because it kind of feels like its own thing. And we can get into this, Bram, but I call it's almost like the emergence of another species. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. We're sort of marching toward, can the AI do things without us? Can they become autonomous, completely autonomous? And it's looking like that's going to be happening relatively soon. We already have Claudebot and OpenClaw and all these people building these agentic AI systems. So again, back to your question, AI is going to tend toward becoming centralized. That's just the nature of humanity. We tend to have power structures. The power flows up to the top of the pyramid. The people at the top of the pyramid have the most power. They want to keep the power, so they maintain that structure. And you see that happening right now, whether we like it or not, with companies like OpenAI, we got Sam Altman, we got Elon building XAI. Those are probably in my mind, the two biggest players. And look, I love Elon. I'm personally not as fond of Sam Altman. I don't really, I don't know either of them, but I tend to sort of like the vision that Elon has. I use both products, right? But at the end of the day, like, they're both centralized. And so I said, you mentioned Bitcoin as a mirror. AI is also a mirror in the sense that Sam Altman and his team, Elon Musk and their team, they're building systems in a closed box. We don't know what they're building. We can't see what their algos are doing. We don't know what their AI, and it's theirs. It's not ours. It's their AI. So we don't know what their AI is operating from. And that's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a statement. That's just the truth. And so I believe we need to go to a decentralized AI type of system that I hope is going to happen organically. There's already lots and lots of companies working on different AI tools. So Jack Dorsey is a guy that he talks about this. He kind of thinks of this, I think, similar to how I do, which is that we should be able to kind of choose. We should be able to choose our AI. We should be able to choose which model we want to run off of, and there should be lots and lots and lots of models. Because if we just have one singular AI, that gets very scary, that type of centralized power. And remember, a lot of people think of whatever an AI says now as the truth. That is not accurate. We're feeding the AI inputs. The AI is giving us outputs based on our inputs. That's incredibly important. So we need to feed the system. We need to feed it in a decentralized way. We have to have lots of different AIs giving lots of different outputs through different algorithms. So I see a decentralized AI future as the only good solution. I think any kind of centralized control, whether it's AI, centralized control of Bitcoin, or anything else, right now fiat is centrally controlled, usually leads to corruption and inequality and big problems.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. OnRamp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while OnRamp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that OnRamp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now OnRamp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. OnRamp, strength in many, simplicity in one. Hey there, just a quick note before we continue. The podcast has really been growing and I'm super grateful for that. Over 70,000 people tune in regularly, but I've also seen that about 60% of you still haven't subscribed yet. So if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you think the content is valuable, I want to ask you to subscribe on YouTube and please like any video that you find value in. This really helps me to fuel the YouTube algorithm and also to reach more people with the message on Bitcoin. I want to thank you for your support. Now let's continue. this pendulum swing idea. I feel like, that eventually it's all about harmony, but we go up and down, right? And at some point we're at an inflection point in the middle, and then, it either continues up or down. And you have this idea of this pendulum swing. And I do feel like the pendulum swing has gone very far to the centralization side. And the last few weeks have felt, I don't know, interesting. I think there's a lot of chaos. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. There's like not a lot of direction. I think we are in this final phase towards centralization, and the people that support centralization are doing everything to protect what they've gathered, right, or what they control. And in between comes AI within all this chaos. So I also think that AI, and I agree with you, I don't think we only should, but I think it's going to happen, because just the whole concept of decentralization well,
we started decentralized. We started in tribes, if you go back far enough. We were all spread out, all decentralized. No one was using the same stuff. And we've gone extreme centralization now, again, back to globalization, really with the U.S. dollar as that core sort of centralizing force that goes beyond borders, because it's the world reserve currency. And that type of centralization, you can see the effects. You mentioned the fourth turning. I'm one of the people in the industry that is sort of banging on that drum and saying we are absolutely in a fourth turning. And, that's debatable what that term means or how you define it. But in my mind, it's very clear to me that we're in sort of that fourth quarter, the last quarter of the game, and the game is about to change. And when you talk about all the chaos, to me, that's a signal of the fourth turning. When you have all this chaos, you realize the system is sort of starting to break. It's starting to break, and something else has to emerge. And to me, those two things, which is what my new book's about, and also these articles, is sort of like the emergence of Bitcoin and AI, and those two together. And I believe that can bring us into that with that fork in the road. I think that can take us from this sort of fourth turning that has been brought on by extreme centralization and unhealthy globalized centralization from the U.S. dollar and the powers and the power structures of other countries, back to a more decentralized reality where we can kind of operate sort of without the big brother. And the big brother is trying everything it can. All the CBDCs that are coming out in Europe, the Genius Act, the switch from, over from analog money to stable coins. These are all efforts to sort of maintain that central control. But I believe the forces of Bitcoin and AI are going to allow us to settle somewhere far more decentralized than we've had.
Just the whole idea that you can just use AI to infinitely replicate and reverse engineer any other, well, especially digital product or service or tech that you come across today. I saw a guy I know from my country. He made like a cursor for hardware. So he just said like, this is what I want to build with hardware. Then it searches on the internet for all the components he has to buy, which are stupid cheap, by the way. And then he says, okay, I have all the components. And then, the AI says, wire this with this thing, and then the display there and whatnot. And then, oh, here's the code, copy it on your Raspberry Pi or whatever. And boom, it worked. And that's just a random dude that has never touched hardware in his life before he did this. Right. So stuff like that is already happening today. And I think it touches people somewhere, in their creative mind, the fact that productivity is basically democratized now, and it's all about applying your creativity, basically. And so I think that's an underestimated part of this technology, that it has a central rollout, but eventually people will demand and clearly see that their ideas shouldn't be captured in this black box that they connected their Visa card to, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I track exactly with what you're saying, and I agree with you. I would say, just to add on to that point, I think we'll see a continued fragmentation of just sort of products, services, and markets in general, because of what you just said, because anyone now can basically go and build something. You don't have to know how to be a coder. You don't have to go to school to become an engineer or programmer. We've basically now gotten to the place where people are just starting to build their own products and services, and in a way, you can see how that leads us into a world of decentralization. right? Where now you don't need to use the big, service being provided by the multi-billion-dollar company, and you don't need to pay that company, $100 a month or $1,000 a year for the software. You just go build it. You go with your open claw and you spin up your the hardware that you need, and you build it relatively cheaply, and now you have it. So I think we're entering a completely different world. I come from an entrepreneurial background where I love to build, and that was like such a small percentage of the population, and it's like now all of a sudden everyone can be a builder, everyone can create, which is, I think, a good thing. I think it's a good thing.
You also mentioned the alignment problem, right? Which is the fear that AI will optimize for a goal, like the paperclip production problem. I love that you mentioned that, because I read that once and it scared me. So
it is. It's scary.
So it's about how AI optimizes for a goal until it consumes the planet, basically. So I have the definition. I'll read it and then ask you the question. It says, the paperclip maximizer is a thought experiment where an AI is told to make as many paperclips as possible. Because it has no moral context and infinite speed, it eventually turns the entire planet, including humans, into paperclips to meet its goal. It sounds absurd, right? But it ties back to what you just said. Like if we don't use this properly, if you don't prompt it properly, if you're not clear about the input that you're giving it, you're basically getting the output that you want. If you didn't realize what you actually wanted, I think, right? So I think AI really demands this conscious use, and as we know, not everyone is conscious at the same level, right? So there will be stuff that goes wrong, I think. In the article, you argue Bitcoin fixes this alignment problem by introducing economic finality.
Yes, so there's so much here that we could talk about in many different offshoots, but let me just try to tackle a few of the things you mentioned. First, to clarify the alignment problem, what I mean by that is back to how we described AI as a mirror, right? AI is built based off of and operates based off of inputs, and those inputs come from humans. And we're at the place now, which is the scary part, to where after you have enough inputs into the system, and you've got you sort of have the infrastructure built out far enough, the AI can start to then become autonomous, meaning it can go do stuff. It can go do tasks, without the human. So it starts with the inputs, that builds the model. So that kind of like creates the vehicle, if you will. And then the vehicle can go drive around on its own eventually. And that's sort of where we're at right now. The alignment problem is sort of the space in between. Like, how do the inputs affect the outputs of what this new species is going to be doing without us, right? Without us looking, without us watching, without us paying attention. And if our alignment, meaning the inputs, are not, let's say, ethical, moral, there's no safeguards, there's no guardrails, if that's not there, then our alignment is going to be off. And if our alignment is off, and you have a machine or machines that are now autonomous, that are doing things by themselves, we could run into some very, very bad situations. And that's the paperclip example, is like a fun but scary actual real possible example, to where I'll repeat it back, is you tell the AI, I want you to go, produce paper clips, because I want to go start a paperclip company and sell paper clips, whatever. And I just say, go produce, let's go make as many paper clips as you can make. And if the AI has no guardrails, then theoretically, if that AI is optimized, it would turn literally everything into a paperclip. And you can just sort of play out the story it sounds ridiculous at first, but if you think about it, just imagine like some AI program, and it's figuring out how to do things. It's starting to make some calls. It's, you see this on OpenClaw already. So this stuff is already happening. Alex Finn just put out a post on X, where his Claude bot's like calling him, it's like calling him.
Yeah, that was wild.
Like, it's Henry. I mean, it's not that wild to me personally, because I know how this tech works. Like, it's not that crazy, but the point is, he set the inputs, and he's let it go, and now the robot's doing stuff, and the robot decided to call him. So imagine, that the robot's calling, metal distributors, and figuring out how to sort of get the materials to create paper clips at a cheap rate. It figures out how to become profitable doing that, and then it just starts consuming everything and turning everything into paper clips. And if it's good at it, it will then execute that, and it won't stop because the AI thinks it's doing its job, and it actually is, based on the inputs. But clearly, me, the guy that wants a paperclip company, I don't want you to be turned into a paperclip. I don't want the entire world to be turned into paperclips, right? So you get into this very difficult situation. And people like Bram, a lot of folks right now are worried about jobs, right? Like, what are we going to do once the AI takes over? And I think that this is actually going to be one of the biggest jobs, is that we are going to have humans that are just watching for these alignment problems. We have to. There's no other solution, because we're the humans. Like, there has to be at least one of us watching, right? I hope more than one. So I think there's going to be lots of us that are working on this alignment problem, which is essentially just a way of saying monitoring. Like, we just need to monitor the ethics and the morals and the guardrails of these inputs and how the outputs are affected by those inputs. So yeah, I mean, I think that so Bitcoin, back to that point, is sort of the anchor, right? And that is my argument, really, for my entire book, Life After Bitcoin, which is sort of this like theoretical version of the future that I think if we get it right, things will go very well. And to me, that solution is Bitcoin as the anchor for AI. And I think of AI as the engine, and I think of Bitcoin as the guardrails. So AI is an engine with infinite productivity, right? It doesn't sleep. It doesn't forget. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't need a bathroom break. It can go as fast as we want it to go. But there's such a thing as too fast. I'm an entrepreneur. I love moving fast, but there is such a thing as too fast. And Bitcoin is the only thing that I believe can wrangle that speed of AI. I don't think it's regulation. Way too slow. I don't think it's any kind of government or institutional interaction too slow. We need something programmatic. We need something based on math. We need something based on physics, and that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is basically unchangeable. It's a set of rules. It's a set of parameters. It's baked into the Bitcoin code. It's open source, and we know how that system works. So if you imagine, again, let's go back to the example of the paper clips. Let's say we have all these AIs running around. They're all doing different things. Some are creating paper clips. Some are building buildings and robots that are going to go to the moon, and they're doing all these things. If they're all transacting in different currencies, all these different tokens, all this different stuff, they're making up their own currencies. They're speaking in languages we don't know. The robots we're fucked. If that happens, we're fucked.
Yes.
Like, period. So
have you heard the Jabber talk? Did you hear the Jabber talk? Where it goes like beep, 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 beep. It says like, should we switch to, I don't know, it has a name. It's not Jabber Talk. Maybe it's Jabber Talk. I don't know. And it's like 3 AIs on speech mode, 3 phones next to each other, and one says, should we switch to this and this and this? And they're like, yeah. And then it goes like, bloop, 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 bloop. And then the other goes like, do, 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 and you have no clue. You don't know. Well, it's known what they're using, right? But when you're just looking at it, like you and I would have no clue,
right,
what they would actually be communicating.
Right. This is the danger. So we can't have the robots operating on different rails. We all need to be on the same rails. And so that Bitcoin rail is, to me, I see Bitcoin as truth. I see it as the only immutable truth system that has ever existed. I see it as a once in a species event. I compare Bitcoin, or I sort of stack it up with other things like protocols like fire, language itself, the printing press, the internet, right? These are things that are just structurally, they're just protocols. And if humans and AI both operate on that singular Bitcoin protocol, then I believe we will go into the next golden age. And I think economies of scale will start to happen. I think productivity and cost will start to trend to zero. So I follow the same thought theories as Jeff Booth, right, in terms of deflationary economies. And so but it's all predicated on the AIs using Bitcoin. That's the only way that this works.
All the spiritual teachers talk about the golden middle way, right? And that's what the story of Icarus is also about. Like he got wings, right? He flew too close to the sun. He fell down. But the moral of the story, as how I understand it, is not about the hubris, right? It's about where you need to stay. Like the hubris is the same. Yeah, exactly. The hubris is the same as the not even trying, but it's a different intensity. So it should be in the middle. Like you should try, but you shouldn't show too much hubris, or you'll touch the sun and you fall.
Okay, the AI is the wings for Icarus. Bitcoin is gravity. Exactly.
Yes, that's perfect. Yeah, and right. It's also it's literally to keep you in check. It's to keep you. It's
the balancing force. Bitcoin is the balancing force. I talk about Bitcoin as gravity. I talk about Bitcoin as the black hole that consumes everything. The whole universe, everything we know and understand, is all counterbalances. We're on a spinning rock that's floating in nothingness. How does that happen? It's because there's forces at play that is keeping everything in the balance. Bitcoin is that counterbalance to AI. When we talk about scarcity and abundance, we're talking about them in sort of different contexts. And we're also, and it also depends. So it depends on the context, okay, and how you talk about these things. And I want to just make a quick example and a point. So when you talk about Bitcoin and you talk about absolute scarcity, we're talking about 21 million tokens. We're talking about the fact that can't be changed, that it can't be diluted. Okay, a lot of the problems, in fact, I would say probably the core problem of all other money is that it's diluted. It becomes diluted. We just make more of stuff. We figure out ways. We find more gold. We shave, the edges off of coins. We print more paper, whatever it is. And that's just that is a natural entropy that is going to happen. It is just a sort of human phenomenon that we've seen in history. I can give you example after example. So Satoshi Nakamoto figured out a way to stop that, where you can't shave any coins off of Bitcoin, you can't create any new ones, and I'm not going to get into the technical details of how that happens, but just if you're listening, follow me and just accept that for a moment. Now, here's what you have to understand. Bitcoin is it's not infinitely divisible, but is highly divisible, right? We can divide it down into the Satoshi, right? Which is, I think, 9 decimal points, right? Decimal places. So I think don't quote me on the value of a Satoshi right now, but I think it's under a penny. I think once we get over 100 or something, it starts to become maybe like a penny a Satoshi. So I think we're like fractions of a penny per Satoshi right now, right? And I think what's important for people to understand is that as more and more people start adopting Bitcoin, the value of each one of those Satoshis and each Bitcoin continues to rise because more and more people are coming in and playing with it. This is economics. This is something you have to study. It's really sort of counterintuitive for people who don't study it. So I encourage everyone to try to just read about economics, read about supply and demand. But the fact that there are 21 million tokens, but that they're divisible, and that the value of each one of those units will increase as adoption increases. That is the magic. That is the key here. That we have one measuring stick. That measuring stick is defined. Each one of those sats, each one of these bitcoins, it's all backed up by energy, which is tangible. Every sat, every Bitcoin was mined. In order to mine it, there had to be energy expended, and that energy is measurable. That's real. We can measure that energy. That's the heat that comes out of the computer. That's how much work it takes for us to set up the system and do the stuff. So again, it is very hard for people to wrap their heads around, but this is the first time that we've actually had any measuring stick. We've never had a measuring stick. Everyone thinks $1 is $1. That's bullshit. $1 is just the piece of paper that you hold in your hand. The purchasing power of that dollar is changing all the time because it's getting debased all the time. And so, again, it's just sort of this function. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, which is like why, people talk about the matrix. It's like we can see that value, people like me and you, we see people like more and more value flowing into the system. And as more and more value flows into the system, that's number go up. That's number go up. And like every time that the number goes down, it's just people not understanding how the system works. You and I know this. So it just becomes this hilarious game where we're like watching the value flow in.
Why are the Bitcoiners so crazy?
Watching people trade out. Like you're trading, whenever you trade out of Bitcoin, you're trading real money, real energy, actual tangible value for something fake. A fake dollar, a fake stock. Bitcoin is not an asset. It is so much more than an asset. It has some coins that we tie a dollar value to, and that's a number go up stat. But I don't care if all the dollars in the world go to nothing, right? That argument, it doesn't matter because Bitcoin isn't a single solitary, like it's a measuring stick, right? So if all the dollars go away, it's just going to measure something else. It's going to measure gold. It's going to measure apples. It's going to measure barrels of oil. It doesn't matter. You know, if the US dollar disappears, it's not like Bitcoin goes away. And that's just the fallacy of an American thinking in US dollar terms. It's very hard for us to think outside of dollar terms. But if you start to realize Bitcoin is not like a stock, it's not an asset, it's a measuring stick. It's a measuring stick for value, and it's the sandbox for money, and it's the only real money that's ever existed. Then you start to see why it doesn't really matter what the dollar's doing. It doesn't really matter what gold's doing.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue. So your book is called Life After Bitcoin. You mentioned that we can fix the survival problem. We can have hard money. We can have a proper reward for our work. We can basically build anything with AI, robots, etc. But then you talk about the meaning crisis. So humans we've always used our intellect to gain an economic advantage or to create a certain economic reward, right? But that's going to be gone. I think you would agree. So
diminishing.
What do people actually do with their time? How do people find purpose again? What is that? Well, what does that look like?
Sure, this is a great question. So this gets into the later stages of my book and my theory, which kind of takes us into what I call the golden age. And I draw comparisons to the first Renaissance, which is sort of like the Medicis, the Florin. They did a very good job keeping their money hard. They didn't debase it. And this is sort of the Enlightenment. This gave birth to the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. And if you look at that period, what do you see? You see beautiful architecture. You see a proliferation of art. You see, you know, the buildings that they built back then are still standing, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years later. Some of the best art pieces and some of the most beautiful content ever created came out of those periods. Why? Very simple. People could relax. People could take a breath. We haven't been able to take a breath for hundreds of years. We don't realize we're in the silent depression right now. We're oppressed. We don't know because we've been living through it through generations, and we just think this is how it is. This is not how it has to be. This is the battle for humanity. It's the battle for our energy back. It's the battle for our time back. We're not meant to be hurriedly rushing around, scrambling to try to figure out how to get the next dollar. That is not what we're supposed to be on this planet doing. We're supposed to be here thinking, growing, evolving, playing around, messing around, being curious. So I believe what happens is we go to a world where all of a sudden all of these problems start to crumble away, start to fall away. Governments get smaller. The whole globalization, big brother government, that whole experiment is over. We start to go bottom up. We start to build communities from the bottom up, and those communities run on Bitcoin, and those communities run on AI, and those communities run on whatever you and me and these other entrepreneurs are building. It's a new era. It's a new surge of entrepreneurship and creativity and creation that I think nobody's ready. I'm not ready. You're not ready because we don't know what we don't know. And there's so many entrepreneurs out there that are building right now. I like to imagine a future where, we're taking, like, I have a 5-year-old, okay? My daughter, she's going to be 6 soon. I'm imagining a world where maybe my daughter's hanging out on the moon every now and then. Maybe she's hanging out on Mars every now and then. Maybe she's up there. Yeah. Maybe she's up there for a party. Maybe she's doing a research project up on the moon, paid for by her mentor or whoever she's working with. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of crazy stuff to where we're just building, creating, we're curious, we're creating art, we're creating new science, we're creating new ways to explore the frontier. I think curiosity is the key to humanity, and I think curiosity has been completely suppressed and pretty much destroyed and erased from society. If you look around, there hasn't been a lot of curiosity and creativity over the last 40, 50, 60 years. Our architecture sucks. Our systems suck. Everything sucks. The government systems suck. Like, it's not very impressive. And then you look back at the first golden era, at the first Renaissance. I mean, all those cathedrals, all the things they were building and doing. I mean, it's incredible. I want to get back to that. And so I see a world where I think we just move a lot more toward creativity, creation, invention, science, and just starting to understand the universe.
If we think about everything we talked about as being this civilizational fork, also, I think in the attitude of people, and especially people that are way younger than us, that are like at the beginning of their adult life, how would you talk to an 18 or 21-year-old that has like a nihilistic idea of the future? Like, how can we tell them that they can be architects or actors in everything that is happening here instead of kind of being like spectators or bystanders?
Well, I am middle-aged at this point, and life goes faster than you can possibly imagine. And I like to think that I have some wisdom. I think I do at this point. However, young people continue to impress me. And I don't know if they need much, honestly. I think for me, my job is to just get out here, do these podcasts, write my stuff, put out sort of my thoughts, and I believe the right young people will pick it up. I think they're already picking it up. I think a lot of them don't even need to pick it up. I'm so impressed by the generation right now that's, call it like whatever it is. I guess is it Z? I think it's Generation Z, maybe Alpha. I think my daughter's Alpha. She's a little too young. She's not old enough to do stuff yet, but the people in their teens, the teenagers right now, the people that are like college age, they're smarter than we are, man. Like, they know what's going on. They see the writing on the wall. Like, I think fewer folks are going to go to college. I think fewer folks are going to kind of go into the centralized systems. I think fewer young people are going to have any interest in government and going into government jobs. They're going to be like, this is not for me. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to work with my AI agent and I'm going to build the next multi-billion-dollar company, and it's going to do X, Y, Z. So I'm very hopeful for the builders, the entrepreneurs, the young people. I think every generation is just doing the best they can, and I'm no different. So I just implore everybody, myself, you, everybody, to just speak truth as much as you possibly can. See, I'm a truth seeker, so I try to seek out the truth, and then I try to voice my opinion on what I believe the truth to be. And truth is a funny thing. Truth is a very funny thing because we're all living our own truth. I see it as almost like truth is granular. Everyone is living their own reality, and we all try to agree on sort of like what is the base layer of truth. And that's why I love Bitcoin so much, because I think no matter where you are, on what intelligence scale, how old you are, your history, your past, whatever you think, Bitcoin can kind of be that anchor. But because we're in the fourth turning, there's massive incentive for everybody to just pick this stuff up. Just do the right thing. Get into Bitcoin. Get into AI. Start messing around with it. Fire up a node. Get an agent. Start downloading some software. Building with AI. I think it's going to happen organically.
I think that's a great hopeful message. So that's a good one to end with. But I do want to ask you my last question, and I ask everyone the same question, sure. Which is, what is a core belief you will never let go of?
The best advice is your own advice.
I like that. You're the first person who says that. That's great. Okay, that's an amazing ending. Thanks so much for this talk. Honestly, probably top 5 conversations for me. I think we went very far, and I hope people found it valuable. If you did and you're still listening, let us know in the comments, please. And if you have any other ideas or stuff you maybe want Jesse and me to talk about in the future, let us know. Again, I really enjoyed it. I want to thank you, and yeah, let's stay in touch, man.
The feeling is mutual, my friend. Thank you so much.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for our next episode. Bye.